Welcome to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. I've got an unusual pairing for you today. The first, to look at the very unglamorous mission of a hot Silicon Valley startup looking to bring transparency to municipal finances. And the second, a chat with libertarian feminist Virginia Postrel on the nature of glamour. Let's start with OpenGov.com, whose CEO, Zac Bookman, dropped by our studio on his visit to Boston.
Zac, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Bill. I'm glad to be here.
What brings you to Boston?
I spoke yesterday on a panel at the MIT Media Lab Tech Conference on disrupting communities and was joined by some other entrepreneurs, speaking to a lot of students from Sloan Business School and elsewhere in the Cambridge community.
Interesting you should pick the topic, disrupting communities.
I didn't choose the topic, but I was really glad to be on the panel. It was about how new web technologies are encouraging innovation and disrupting communities in a very positive way.
Well, tell us about OpenGov.com.
OpenGov.com is a web platform that cities and other governments around the country subscribe to. We parse their financial data and map it to the organizational structure of the government so that senior executives and department heads and others in the government can actually drill down to the object level in their financial data, see trends in it, analyze it, create reports, and then actually share all the data with their citizens.
So it's both a management tool and a transparency tool.
Correct.
Are there any functions that are only available to the government officials and not available to the public?
There are, and there will be. There's fairly sophisticated analytics tools, comparative capabilities, operational management, budget to actual comparisons that are really useful for finance directors, CFOs, and other finance officers that really wouldn't be very useful to ordinary citizens. That said, citizens have access to the whole budget, all the actual historical financial data, and can really see the services that the city or other government provides and understand where the money goes.
So when you ask the question, where are my taxes going, the answer is push this button and you'll see.
Correct. And the answer is you'll see more than you kind of ever imagined possible, and you'll learn a great deal about how public administration works.
Now, how did this company get started?
We were running a nonprofit out of Stanford University, 4 of us, doing data visualization on pension and budget issues after the California budget crisis.
And when was this?
This was 2009. Things got off the ground. My co-founder, Nate Levine, who was just named last month to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and our chairman, Joe Lonsdale, who's a very successful software entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, who was also on that list a couple of years ago, started the nonprofit to help governments analyze their finances and communicate them. And we discovered a great need across the country in that every government in the country is using an enterprise system, particularly an accounting system, a big piece of very expensive customized software that often runs on computer code written 30 years ago. And that means that senior executives can't even access their own data very well. If you ask the average city manager in the country a basic question like, how much have you spent on police salaries in the last 5 years? Many of them would have to call IT to run a report from the accounting system to see that data.
So they're flying blind.
In a sense, they're flying blind, or they're just hampered by old technology and difficult tools and the workflows required to get the data at their fingertips. That means that if you're a mayor or an elected official, you're often one step removed from an executive who's one step removed from the data. If you're a citizen, you're in the dark. If you're a bond trader or other that works in this community, you don't have the data that you want or you need.
Now, you're not replacing that underlying accounting software. You're just putting a visualization level on top?
Correct.
And when did you decide to switch over from nonprofit to a for-profit status?
The nonprofit is still going, cacs.org. It's one of the top think tanks in California on kind of budget issues, but it's really a think tank in terms of papers and advancing the conversation. This is about building world-class software that makes workflows better, that improves the lives of government officials on the inside, and the connection, the trust, the goodwill with communities. And that's a software company. We started that 2 years ago in the heart of Silicon Valley, and we're building outstanding software and attracting many of the best people in the country to the mission.
And how have you been financed?
Venture-backed, Formation 8 partners, Thrive Capital, many of the top angels in Silicon Valley are getting involved.
Do they really see venture returns in this kind of a business, or are they more ideological investors?
No, there's a great big company in here that is going to generate excellent returns. As I like to say internally, the bigger and better our company is, the more good we can do for the world. So it's a very powerful mission in the sense that our software is going to help bring efficiency to government and help engage communities.
A triple bottom line kind of company.
Yeah, maybe even quadruple. It's good for those on the inside. It's good for the elected officials. It's good for the citizens, and it's going to be good for the investors and everyone involved in the company.
Well, it's good for honest elected officials. Do you have any concern that there's some municipal governments that don't want to be transparent?
There are some, of course, but there's kind of this pervasive meme in the United States that all government officials are corrupt or not honest, and that's just not accurate. The vast majority of government officials in the United States want to do a good job. They work hard. They're smart people. These are not folks who are trying to hide things or don't want to engage with the public. They're working in big bureaucracies, big organizational systems with old technologies and very difficult incentives. And that's our experience. And that's one of the reasons why so many governments are signing on to the platform and at an ever-increasing pace. I would note some exciting cases. For instance, Bell, California, which became very notorious and famous in 2010 for what was then pretty much the biggest public administration scandal in a generation, where the city manager was paying himself seven-figure salary and kind of the city council robbing the community blind.
So this was not an example of one of the good players.
No, this was kind of the worst of the worst, and it was a big disaster. The whole administration is now in jail, and the new administration came in and is forced to dig out the finances and engage with the community.
There's a new sheriff in town,
in a sense, and so they connected with OpenGov and are using the software to open up the finances, to get control of things, and to actually engage the public to start to rebuild that trust.
Well, maybe we should give Detroit a call.
Would love to. It's not actually funny. Would really love to help Detroit, and it's really a matter, as all these sales are, of getting to the decision makers and speaking to the right people.
Is there a sweet spot in the size of the cities you work with, or is there no limit? Could you do Los Angeles, or would that be beyond your ability?
We can do Los Angeles, and it's quite possible that by the time this broadcast airs, the city of Los Angeles will have debuted its OpenGov site to the world. So we can work with great big multi-billion-dollar governments, and indeed are, and we can also work with tiny counties, tiny towns of just a few $1 million or a couple thousand people.
No kidding. And how is this priced?
This is priced to be just as affordable as possible. It's based on the budget size of the city. And for most of the cities in the country and most of the special districts and school districts and other government agencies, they're able to get on board for less than the discretionary amount that would be required to say, go to an RFP.
When did you take on your first live city?
Palo Alto, California was our first live city, and that was less than a year and a half ago. We started last year with just three free beta partners to kind of get the software going, get the feedback loops. We intended to get 25 paying customers on the platform and ended the year with more than twice that. And a new city is now coming on board every 2 to 3 days.
Really? Is this a self-serve product, or do you have to bring these people up with a lot of training?
Somewhere in the middle. It's very easy to get on board. It takes a city start to finish, often less than a week. For the city, in terms of its own time, it's sometimes just as little as a couple of days. Basically, they need to send us a full extract of their accounting data. Some cities have that on the ready for their auditors, and others need to kind of pull it out of these old systems, but we take it from there.
So this isn't real time. You're working with historical data.
Yeah, cities don't actually work in real time typically. They do in some transactional data sets, but their basic accounting systems are required to be closed, as in audited. And so most cities work on a monthly and some even on a quarterly basis, some even on an annual basis. So they're not like hedge funds where it's like, hey, how do we do today?
So you're not interfacing with live systems. You're interfacing with files that they send you.
Correct.
That's why it's so easy to get up.
Correct. Although these are very big files with very complicated data in them. These organizations are large. Many of them would rank in the Fortune 500, and they're very complicated. Many of them are much more complicated than a Fortune 500 company.
And how far back do you go looking at historical data?
As far back as the city would like. We have some sites like Thousand Oaks, California, that have 10 or 12 years of historical financial data. So you can see all the trends across the city in terms of revenue, expenses, all through the departments, all through their funds.
I noticed from your website, a lot of the cities are in California. Is that an intentional focus or just because it's convenient?
Well, it seems like the cities there are noticing the other cities are doing it and saying, wow, this is a great tool, and it's kind of organic growth. But we're now in governments in 14 or 15 other states as well.
So, Zac, let's dive down a little bit and take us through what a particular city would look like and the kind of information you'd be sharing with citizens.
Sure. Why don't we just jump online here, type in www.opengov.com, which is our corporate homepage. From this page, you can click on the Customers tab at the top of the page, and you can see a list of all the customers on the platform. This list is growing, as I noted, but you could click, for instance, on the city of Palo Alto, California. Palo Alto's in the heart of Silicon Valley. It's a 60,000 person city with a fairly large budget because they operate their own utilities. And what happens when you click on that is all of their financial data comes up. This is their OpenGov site, and it's available at paloalto.opengov.com.
So they have a branded site as well.
Exactly. And every city and every other government does too. So you could go to springfield.opengov.com for the capital of Illinois. You could go to Simsbury, Connecticut.opengov.com, that kind of thing. At paloalto.opengov.com, what you're looking at here is a beautiful presentation of all of their financial data. There's 5 years of historical financial data along the bottom, and their 13-14 budget, all broken down according to the departments in the city, which you see on the right-hand side of the page. So you can click into any department, like police, for instance, and pull up all the divisions within that department, say field services and emergency response and other things.
Now, you don't get down to the salary level of their top employees, do you?
We don't. We have salaries are kept in the accounting system in the aggregate. In the actual salaries paid are transactional data, which is not carried here. But you could go into, say, the police department or the field services division, which are the cruisers or cops on the street, on the beat, and you could click over on the left-hand side on the filter menu and switch to looking at expenses, not by department, but by expense type. And now that you're within the police department or within the field services department, you could look at all the expense categories and how all the money flows through that department or that division, including salaries and benefits. And you could even drill deeper to see the expense subtypes. So within salaries and benefits, as you'll see here, you've got salaries, you've got pensions, you've got overtime. So you could look at overtime costs, not just across the city, but across the whole department. And not just across the whole department, but across every single division within the department and every program within every division. Whatever level of data is kept in the accounting system, we're opening that up.
And if you have historicals, you can easily see whether anomalies or spikes or big changes, which might lead to some questions.
Exactly. And it's actually useful for the government officials. They live in this data, and it could be very useful at a meeting or at a council meeting when you're dealing with the elected officials who are responsible for policy to put everyone on the same page. Now you're talking about numbers and not anecdotes or not, hey, I heard or I think. No, it's right there.
And do you track tax revenues as well?
All the revenue information is there. And let me show you this. If you go to thousandoaks.opengov.com, this is a city in Ventura County, California. They have about a $150 million budget. If you click on the left-hand side where it says Show Expenses, you open that up and you say Show Revenues. You can see the entire revenue composition of the city over 12 years. It's an incredible presentation of data. You can see the revenues dip after 2008 financial crisis. You can see how they're starting to climb back. And what's very exciting is if you click to show revenues by revenue type as opposed to by department, you can see the revenue composition of the entire city. So you can see sales and use taxes. You can see fees and other sources of income for the city. And then you can drill into those. So you can go within sales and use taxes to see sales taxes. And then you can go within sales taxes to see what comprises that. You could imagine Bill sitting at the dinner table and actually explaining this so that people can understand what's going on in their city.
Do you also track tax rate, statutory tax rate information, or just tax revenue?
Just revenue. This is financial information.
Okay, because that would make for a fascinating study to see how the two relate.
It would. And one thing although this isn't a comprehensive system for kind of everything you'd want to know about how the city's operating, it can really tee up the conversation. So if you want to pull up tax rates or if you want to pull up anything else you know about the city, you now have the financial information at your fingertips so you can use it to talk about performance measures or policies or other things.
Well, or let's see if the Laffer curve really works.
Sure.
Do you find that journalists are starting to take interest in this information?
Journalists are excited about this. Many of the cities, when they get their OpenGov site, they release it to the public and let all the journalists know, and we're being written about in local papers across the country. And it's a great tool for journalists, both to get the word out to the community and to engage the public, but also because journalists kind of live in this as well, and it's a very useful tool for them to know what's going on.
Now, you haven't been around long enough to get through many election cycles, but I would think that people running for office might love this as well, particularly if they have complaints. They can go in and pull the data out and back that up with facts.
I think that's right, and coming into office is a particularly good time to, hey, let's get started. This is important to our administration. By the same token, if you're already in office, there's no reason to wait, and many are coming on board. It's really a new tool based on very sophisticated web technologies that we're building in-house.
Can I ask what you use on the back end? Presumably you're not building your own servers for this. You're using...
No, it's cloud hosted on Amazon Web Services. It's secure and fast, but a lot of the data ingestion, data processing, and visualization technologies are all in-house.
So a service like this actually probably would have been possible to build for a startup like yours before Amazon Web Services.
Probably not, and it certainly would have been, but it's much more expensive. And the beauty of this is the economy of scale. Governments around the country are able to take advantage of what is multi-million-dollar software for just a very small fraction of the price.
And so what's the limit on your rate of growth?
There's about 80,000 public governments in the United States. It's a very large market.
And you're in how many so far?
70 tomorrow, we hope.
Okay, you have a long way to grow the market. Any competitors show up on the horizon yet?
Not really. We're pretty focused on what we're doing, which is visualizing, analyzing, and sharing the financial data and helping the governments do the same. There are other companies that do different types of data sets, GIS data on manhole covers and arbor counts, and helping governments kind of post all their data online.
Asset management.
Well, data asset management, you might say. And then, of course, governments spend a good deal of time and money working themselves on how to become more transparent and provide similar services. Some governments are kind of using consultants or trying to use in-house IT staff to build similar tools, which, although sometimes they come out pretty well, are very expensive and not necessarily the best way for governments to be spending their time.
Now, can I go to your website and A/B two cities and say, for example, how's Palo Alto doing compared to Menlo Park in these metrics?
You sure can. And one thing we hope to do is to build the technology to actually help governments do that themselves. It's an important analytical tool for a government finance officer or even a department head or of course, a manager or elected official to be able to get financial comparisons and benchmarks. How do you know how well you're doing as a government? If you're in the private sector, you need good comparisons just as you would in the public sector. And this is the type of technology and this is the type of centralized platform that could help create those financial comparisons and make them really fast and really useful.
Are bond traders taking interest in this yet?
Yes. We get approached fairly frequently by interested parties, fans, the public, bond traders, rating agents, commercial banks. As we build this, it's going to be an incredible repository of very important municipal financial data that's useful to the government officials, useful to the elected officials, useful to citizens, and also useful to the private community that does issuances or rates bonds or trades them. Because right now they're relegated to comprehensive annual financial reports that are out of date, to 300-page budget PDFs that are hard to even open, yet alone read, and Bloomberg terminals which show yield rates on a green screen.
Do you see a role for some sort of higher level aggregation of the data, a big data play that takes in the information from all the different municipalities, munges it together, and starts providing a product or service to somebody?
Yeah, I do. I think that's actually what we're talking about.
Okay.
There's a lot of work to get there, and it revolves around building out the footprint and building out the technology and getting governments on board so that this service becomes really useful to them right now.
So what kind of value are government officials seeing in this?
We gave a webinar a few weeks ago to a dozen governments or so, and a management analyst from Virginia wrote back shortly after, and he said, "I have never been so excited about government finances in my life." That was really gratifying to receive. This is someone who lives in government financial data and hopefully will become a customer very soon. Specifically, governments are able to, and this is a quote, see things in this data that they've never been able to see before. When you're using an accounting system that's old or even one that's new, you often have to run a query based on an object code. These are long kind of series of account strings, if you will, that categorize the different funds and departments and divisions and programs that make up the government services. And you're essentially looking at your data in two dimensions. This tool allows you to see graphically and visually in what you might call 3 dimensions. It allows you to drill into the data so that, for instance, in a school district, you could see special education spending across the whole district. But then you could see it across one organization type in the district, say high schools. And you could even drill down and see one specific high school in the district. And you could do that for food spending, book spending, pension spending.
And look for anomalies.
And look for anomalies. We've had governments tell us they may have bought it for the transparency value or let's engage the citizens. This is a great service to bring them in and build the trust and goodwill. And then they get the site and they scour it and say, oh my gosh, I've never been able to see my data in this way. And we've had governments that have even found anomalies in what are their charts of accounts. The chart of accounts is the financial structure of the government. And that's really exciting because that's the kind of thing that they would live for a very long time with and not know and potentially make mistakes as a result of. Or they'd go hire consultants that charge a great deal of money and time to kind of solve or help build or rectify anomalies in the chart of accounts, and they can actually see that and make changes quickly with this.
Has use of OpenGov kicked off any reform initiatives in any of your customers?
There's a number of, not necessarily reform initiatives, but transparency movements and regulations that are percolating around the country in different states. Arizona is mandating a level of transparency, as is Michigan. California is considering it. I wouldn't say OpenGov has kicked it off, but it's part of a broad movement and secular trend toward more open government, more transparent data.
Any hope of getting this at the state or federal level, or are you just sticking at the municipal level right now?
No, we are already working with state agencies. The Lieutenant Governor, Gavin Newsom in California, has brought on his office and the California State Lands Commission, which owns and manages all of the oil and gas contracts in California, bringing in nearly $500 million in revenue for the state. So very shortly, that commission or that agency is going to be putting all of its revenue and financial data online for everyone to see. And we're talking with other state agencies. Many counties are coming on, as I noted, school districts, special districts, which are transportation districts, harbor districts, fire districts, water districts. These types of special purpose governments are coming on the platform as well.
California is famous for its looming unfunded liability problem. How does your system track unfunded liabilities?
It doesn't. The problem with unfunded liabilities is they're not tracked in the accounting system.
So what can be done about that? Is there any way you can contribute solutions to that problem?
Not sure. It's an issue many of us care deeply about, and which is very important to the fiscal health of the state, and indeed many of the states and cities. The key problem there, as the Volcker Ravitch task force has lobbied the Senate and talked about repeatedly, is that unfunded pension liabilities are not on the books, that governments aren't using GAAP accounting for many of these pension costs. They're using cash-based accounting. And what that means is you're only acknowledging the money that physically goes out
each
for
year,
the pensions, as opposed to the promises that are made. And that's the real problem. And it's not something that the useful, beautiful software is necessarily going to solve as much as it is a political problem.
So, Zac, what's your long-term vision here? What's the dream of what you want to accomplish with this?
We're a very mission-driven company at OpenGov.com. We think that great technology and software can help government officials in their work, and it can help engage citizens in the process of governing. And as we build more sophisticated tools, we can build a great company that's really going to strongly impact communities around the country and be a part of the open government movement and be a part of solving many of the existing financial problems with our democracy.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. I can't wait till this comes further east and perhaps we get it here in Boston. Let's keep in touch.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Zac Bookman, CEO of OpenGov.com, here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza, and would love to hear your comments and suggestions, so please drop me a note at bill@realclearradio.org. In the second half of the hour, Virginia Postrel is going to reveal the deep meaning of glamour. Stay tuned.